here's number one. Think process, not event. Think process, not event. It's really interesting because one of the things that makes webinar marketing so much more effective than general marketing is that it's event driven. There's a date and a time, and people know that this event's on Friday at 10 a.m. or whatever it is, and then it gives us an opportunity to promote on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, leading up to it, and even more times on the actual day. And it gives us a chance to kind of ramp up and then take it away slowly because it's event driven, right? Versus, hey, I've got this sales video online. There's no scarcity. There's no built-in kind of time and date that forces people to attend at a certain time. Does that make sense? So webinar marketing is event marketing. The reason it's so successful is because we're promoting an event. But the key to promoting a webinar is to think of a conveyor belt, to think of a process with multiple steps in it, and not what we're going to do is we're going to build a sales and marketing process, not just like send out some emails to get people onto my next webinar. Thank you very much. Does that make sense? Do you understand the difference? If you promote the event, you can do okay once, but you end up often hammering your list or leaving out important details. What we want to do instead is we want to think through all the details up front together, you and I right now, get the process locked in, and so that every time we promote this event, this process leads people, to register, to show up, gets them on the webinar where they, where a high percentage buys, and then follows up afterwards. If you think event, it's, you typically will think about sending out some promo emails, and we don't even think about the stick strategy to get people to show, and most of us don't even do a follow-up system afterwards. If you think event, you'll lose opportunity. If you think process, you get all the ducks in a row up front, and you can just run it forever. So that's number one. Number two, slice and dice the time. If you think about that flowchart, if you think about that process, really, we don't have one job. I think the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to marketing a webinar is they think their job is promote webinar, send promo emails, and then their job is done. Because they think about marketing a webinar as one step, and it's not one step, it's actually four. Okay, so if we were to draw this out, there's really four steps that go in sequence, right? And for some of you guys, hopefully this will look familiar, and if not, then you're in exactly the right place. So there's really four steps to marketing a webinar, and there's four different goals that we've got along the way. And so step number one is to get people to sign up for your webinar. So instead of going, hey, we're going to market this webinar, let's just slice this into four different pieces. Step number one, we want people to sign up. Step number two, just because somebody's registered doesn't mean they're going to necessarily attend. So our second goal is to get people to show up. And that's where our stick strategy and our post-registration campaign, in between when they've registered and the actual event itself, that campaign is all about drive attendance. Okay, so this is drive registrations. This is drive attendance. Obviously, that brings us to our webinar itself. And our job at the webinar is to get people to pay up, to make a decision for themselves, for their future, and about your program. Okay, obviously here, our job is to drive conversions or drive sales. Oops. Yeah. Now, in my business, up until really recently, that's all I've done. I got, the first thing I mastered was this bit, and then I was like, okay, great. We need to get more people on here. And then I realized that if I didn't do that, then I was missing out. I was just using the traditional go-to webinar, follow-up emails and losing out. And up until recently, and many of you guys know, because we've talked about this before, that's all I did. But if you do that, you're missing out on, in my recent experience, about 30% of the sales. And so the fourth piece is follow-up. After the webinar's done, following up with the people, and that's, again, it's about driving, it's about driving sales as well. So you've actually, if you do this system right, we've got two things we're doing to get people to attend. Yeah, that's registration, sign up and show up. And we've got two things we do to maximize sales and conversions, right? Which is pay up and follow up. And so here's what I want you to think. Hopefully this is nothing new. You kind of get the concept. Here's what I want you to think about though. The shift happens when you go, great, I've got now these four things that I need to do in my webinar, in a webinar promotion system. And if you're smart, you'll go, basically, this is, these are little individual systems that fire off in succession, almost like an autoresponder sequence. So you've basically got a sign-up sequence inside Office Autopilot or Infusionsoft or whatever you use, designed to get people to register, and that's a series of emails into Facebook and et cetera, et cetera. Once they register, they instantly get disconnected from that and connected to Show Up, which is a different sequence automatically. And so if you're not doing it automatically, then it's hard work and it's manual and it's a bit annoying, right? At the end of the webinar, on the webinar itself, and that's the sequence itself, and that's less an automated sequence, but that's more about what you do on the webinar. For the sake of today, as I said, we're going to focus on on the other 3 points, not so much on what to do on the webinar itself. But at the end of the webinar, we're going to have a third sequence kick in, which is at the end of the webinar, did they show up or not? Did they buy or not? What time did they leave? And we're going to follow those people up differently. So I don't want you to just firstly understand that marketing webinar isn't one job, it's 4. I want you to understand that 3 of those pieces are things that we can create autoresponder sequences for that just happen automatically, and that our job is to think about this like an architect and actually just kind of design these out inside our software system. Is this making sense so far? Just a quick yep if it is, or a nope if you've got questions. Awesome. Great. So our job basically at the end of today is if we can design 3 follow-up sequences, something to drive registration, something to drive attendance, and something at the end of the webinar to follow up and drive follow-through sales, then we're doing really well. Matt Maloof is saying, hell yeah. Awesome. So we're good. And so I think, let me just, there's one thing that's kind of in my heart to say, and hopefully you've got it, but I want to make sure that this totally gets across. If you walk away with it from this webinar going, okay, there's 3 things I need to focus on, that's okay. But if you walk away from this thing going, great, I've just got 3 autoresponder, like 3 follow-up sequences to build, install into my system so I never have to do them again, that's the outcome I'm looking for. Does that make sense? So I don't want this to be work. I want this to be once work, okay?